Welcome to the Nonprofit Exchange. Stories by leaders for leaders to help you to raise the bar on your own performance and to release the potential inside of you. Now, here's today's episode. Greetings, everyone. This is Hugh Ballou. Welcome back to a new episode of the Nonprofit Exchange. And in 7.5 years of doing this, almost 300 episodes, we've had very unique episodes. Even people talking about the same topic have a much different insight and different things to offer. My guest today is a new friend, a dear friend, who's a very capable leader right here in Lynchburg, Virginia. And he's in the realm of education. He's got background doing various things, but he's a very competent leader, and I've watched him in action and we've worked together. And so I said, Chris, why don't you come on the Nonprofit Exchange and share some of your experiences with those people who are wanting some fresh information, wanting some inspiration. So Chris Bryant from the Central Virginia Community College Educational Foundation and the college, he wears two hats. Welcome to the Nonprofit Exchange, and please tell people about who you are.
Great. Thanks, Hugh. And I'm glad you said that we're going to share experiences and not expertise. I don't believe I have any expertise, but I think we all have experiences we can share, and maybe it gives us something we can all compare our successes and our near failures with. With that being said, I hope the next little while we can be entertained amongst friends and learn some best practices. I hope I don't wear you out too much. I can be a bit passionate and sometimes enthusiastic, and hopefully my rose-colored glasses will wear off on each of your listeners and viewers. For me, I live here in Lynchburg, Virginia. I've been all over the Commonwealth with my family, my wife, and my two sons. I've served 5 nonprofit organizations. Started with the Boy Scouts of America, which is a national brand. I did grow up in the program. I'm an Eagle Scout, but professionally, scouting is much different than the program that we all grew up in as a youth character development program. So I started off 10 years with the Boy Scouts of America, and then I worked, and you'll have to know this a little bit about me. My father was a pastor and my mother was a nurse. So I believe that because of those two service-oriented people, champions for all the goodness in the world and love, that they've sort of put me on the track to serve people and be involved in nonprofits. And so when I left scouting, I went to work for an organization at the time was called Presbyterian Homes Family Services, has now rebranded as HumanKind, was an orphanage back in 1903, and is now a multi-million-dollar organization. That's a family services organization that serves a huge chunk of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And then for several years, we were in Northern Virginia in Falls Church serving Capital Caring Hospice, which covers all of Northern Virginia, most of Maryland, and all of the District of Columbia. And then in Alexandria, Virginia, for a while with Goodwin House, which is a senior living facility. It's very similar to Westminster Canterbury if you're from the Commonwealth. And now I'm with Central Virginia Community College, both as the Vice President of Institutional Advancement and also as the Executive Director of the Nonprofit Foundation.
So it's a standalone 501c3 and very distinctly different identity from the community college, which is part of the government, isn't it? It's funded by the government and it's a government institution.
I love that you say that, because that gets to the heart of some of the things that we want to talk about today about community college being free versus what people really think about community college and private schools. And so let's spend a second dissecting that. It's awesome. I have one foot in as an employee of the Commonwealth of Virginia and one foot in the nonprofit that is the standalone 501c3 foundation. Think about University of Virginia. University of Virginia is both a state-supported school, just like Central Virginia Community College, and probably has 50 different foundations that govern all of the different schools of medicine and engineering. So our greatest institutions of education, so UVA, Virginia Tech, William & Mary, JMU, all those big ones here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, they're all state-supported schools. They're not private, so they receive a ton of funding from the Commonwealth, but they also create foundations to help them manage and leverage opportunities to expand their vision, because that's what we're all about as nonprofit leaders. How do we share our story? How do we expand our vision? How do we grow our efforts? So the foundation is a way to do that. So a separate standalone supportive industry that's really meant to uplift the greater organization.
One of your hats is a very big hat of visionary leader. And so why is being visionary important for people, especially in this, we call it nonprofit, which is really a dumb word, but a social benefit, or, we're in a for-purpose business. So why is it important for us to understand and articulate our vision?
I love that you say for purpose. That's so powerful. Well, first of all of us are good. And if you count the number of nonprofits that are in existence today, there are tens and hundreds of thousands. We're all good. We're all best of intentions, and we're all well anointed. So with that being said, how do you choose one or the other? Because there are a finite number of volunteers and champions and dollars. So with that being said, I think one of the things we have to think about is what makes us relevant, what makes us different from the pack, and how can you articulate that? So vision is everything. If you're not growing, you are dying. And I hope I don't offend you by saying that. My father was a pastor, and I've been in a lot of churches that got smaller and smaller and smaller over the years. Faith is as relevant as it ever been. The doors should be open and the churches should be packed. Any place of worship should just be filled to the brim, but that's not the case. And so what we have to do is the organizations that can have a vision and share their vision and empower others to be engaged in delivering that product and that vision and consuming that goodness will prevail. And just because you do it well today doesn't mean you'll do it well tomorrow. So vision truly is everything, because it always has us on that purposeful pathway of growth. So I think we're each on that pathway personally, and we want to be that same pathway of success with organizations as well.
So you've had a good history of really important work experiences behind you. And you came to Lynchburg for this job, I'm guessing. It's you. How long have you been in this position?
Just over 3 years now.
Wow. So my experience, you actually let me in front of your board. My experience, it's a very high performing, very engaged, very professional board of directors who understands being a board of directors. I have found in my work of 33 years doing this, there are very few boards that understand how to be the board. So was that way when you came, or were you part of that transformation, or have you been part of an upgrade in that process?
Well, I think you're exactly right. We do have a board of, there's about 23, 24 directors. They're all presidents and CEOs or folks of prominence in their working careers. With that being said, I think we've been on a journey together that started a little bit before me. We had great board leadership before my entry into the college. And then since then, whenever there's a transition in the executive leadership, there's usually a little bit of transition in the board leadership as well. You see that there are board members that are, one, or endeared with the professional staff, or two, they just use that as an opportunity to check out. I've been doing this for 5, 6, 10, 20 years. There are natural transition points. And so if you're doing your jobs correctly and you have those transitional moments for staff, you're going to have those for board as well. One of the biggest things you're going to do is transition your top leader. And for us, we transitioned our board chair. And it went from a gentleman who had been our board chair for 5 or 6 years and went to someone, and I believe this makes all the difference in the world. We transitioned to a board chair who not only was qualified for the job, the affluence and the influence that we all want a chairman to have, and we want her or him to also be able to tell the story well. Our new board chair is an alum of the college. They are a consumer of the product, not only from themselves, but also his children have attended the college. So I believe that gives him a very distinct position, not only as an industry leader that wants to see a pipeline of talent produced for local industry. And then also we all believe that education is going to uplift the masses. It's the one thing that will get us out of poverty. Education is the key. Dr. King said that. Many folks have said that in the past. We all believe in the mission, but what makes us different, I believe, is that our number one champion, our volunteer board chair, was a consumer, is currently a believer through direct contact, and is able to share that vision and passion with others, and then recruit. If you're not asking on a daily basis for something, we're just not doing our jobs right.
Out there, out in front, being assertive. Who would have thought? Now, you've put a business perspective, but you've also put a relationship piece to this. So I got to observe a board meeting in the past, and just a few months ago. And my experience, I sat in the corner and watched, and everybody leaned in. Everybody they were prepared. And when they had a report, boom, you called on them. You didn't dominate. You just facilitated the process, but people were ready. They were engaged. They were enthusiastic. And you were done in an hour. There's the relationship between the executive director and the board is unclear in many circumstances. There's this sort of standoff. Can I do stuff? Do I need permission? So describe your relationship with the board and how you lead. And the board is responsible for the organization, the finance, the governments. You actually run the organization. So talk about your relationship with the board and how you've cultivated this high-performing perspective and attitude and engagement that's so good.
Hugh, I appreciate you saying that. We are good. The volunteers are fantastic. And let me tell you why we're fantastic. One, because we all clearly know what our expectations are. I mean, everybody wants to be successful. And the way that we become successful is we define our goals and then we work toward it. You got to have those steps to accomplish our goals. With that being said, I believe every board meeting is a 3-step approach. So let me try to simplify it for folks like me that need it simplified. We have quarterly board meetings. And so leading up to that quarterly board meeting, we're going to have regular touch points. We have committee chairs. The true work of the board, as far as I'm concerned, if you want to, and I'll work backward, if you want to keep that board meeting to a 1-hour meeting, the work needs to be done prior to that. And so there's no way we can have that 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. meeting without the work being done early. So if you're not getting work done early, then you're going to have to sort of reshape the way that you think about business. So our committee meetings are 2 weeks before the board meeting. That consistency lets our committees know when they're going to meet. It gives them time to, one, prep for their meeting. And then if there's any action items that need to happen between the committee meetings and the board meeting, it gives us a little bit of a window for that to happen. At the committee meetings, that's where the true lion's share of the work happens. We schedule those meetings for an hour meeting. Sometimes they run to an hour and a half or 2 hours. That's where the true goodness is happening. For our board, and here's a saying that I absolutely adhere: keep it simple, stupid. It's the KISS mentality. Keep it simple. When you're keeping it simple, we have 4 committees. Our committees are finance, governance, scholarship, and resource development. Each of those committees have a chairperson. That chair, for that meeting to be successful, the committee meetings 2 weeks before the board meeting, I have to meet with the committee chairs for an hour to answer their questions, to get them prepped, and to tee them up for success a week or 2 before their meetings. So that 3-step approach, Hugh, I believe, is executive director or staff meeting with committee chairs leading their committee meetings and making that the lion's share of the work, and then the board chairman leading the board meetings that's going to happen for that 1 hour. If we don't keep it to 1 hour, a couple of things are going to happen. Number one, folks are going to start getting a little frustrated and antsy, and it's not going to allow those committee meetings to really be the meat and potatoes of our work. The other thing is, at 9 o'clock, people are going to get up and start leaving because it's time to go to work. So those clear expectations, I think, help us. And I think those 3-step approaches to a quarterly board meeting is right for us.
Absolutely. And you really shouldn't have a meeting more frequently than you have a need to have a meeting. So you're very purposeful about it. Underlying leadership, the foundation of leadership, is relationship. And it was obvious to me, you knew everybody there and you had a relationship with each person. And my guess is you could ask them to do most anything, and because of that relationship, they would consider it at least, and most of the time say yes. So talk about relationship with the leader and the participants.
Well, I love that. I love that you would say that. I hope that that would be the case. And I do believe, because of the value of the volunteers, they would. First of all, I believe in the innate goodness of people. I believe people want to serve and they want to put their expertise and their practice into work. They want it to come to fruition and come to reality. So number one is you've got to help people be successful. I believe one of the callings as a paid staff or as an executive is to help the volunteers be in a place that they can succeed. I said earlier that you've got to let folks know what expectations are, but Hugh, you're right. Relationships are everything. And so if it all too often we'll recruit someone who has finance expertise and ask that person to intentionally sit on the scholarship committee. And they're like, well, wait a second, I'm a bean counter, I'm a CPA, or I'm a broker, I need to be on your finance committee. We go, there's an opportunity for that to happen, but we would like for you to serve on the scholarship committee for a year or two so you can hear the stories of our students that apply for our scholarships. It's a great touch point where maybe not so much the relationship that I build with the champions is powerful, and it is powerful. The relationship that really needs to be built with our board champions is with the organization and the institution. I hate to say this, but it's another reality. Executive directors and staff will come and go. The organizations are much more viable in the long term. So our foundation's 40 years old and the community college is over 50 years old. And some of our board members have served for more than a decade. I do believe that, in my naivete, that they'll do what I ask them to do because we'll make it fun. I'll respect their time. I'll make them successful. I'll help them be in the right lane. But I think they also do what they do because they see the vision. They believe the impact of their investment of time, talent, and treasure. And then they believe in the calling of the institution. Education is a great calling. And so each of these folks, I believe, will do it because a relationship is being leaned on. I would ask, a board chair would ask, a committee chair would ask. Oftentimes I love it when a student comes and speaks to our board. We always have a student address our board meetings at the very beginning of the meeting. At the top of the hour, we carve out 5 or 10 minutes for a student to come in and tell their testimonial so our board champions can hear directly from our beneficiaries, who they're serving. And so I think that's powerful as well. But those relationships are invaluable.
All around. So there's when you were talking to people, you were sharing a story about talking to the volunteers about doing something. There's a specificity in the ask, and there's a reason why you've made the ask. I think we all too often are apologetic about asking people when they're there to serve, and we sometimes stand in the way of them really fulfilling their passion to do something. And so I don't know why, but what's the secret to engagement for you? Do you give board members a specific job description? Or how do you define their duty and delight, so to speak, in the Christian context? How do you define their duty and delight? So there's a fit for what they want to do and they can do. So what's the discernment process of getting to that engagement point?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a philosophy out there that says, do what you're best at. And then there's the flip side of that is let's become well-rounded people and work on the things that we're no good at. So regardless of where you fit on the paradigm between do what you're best at or work on the things that you need to improve, I truly believe in the philosophy of let folks do what they do best. You're going to have folks on your board that will tell you, I like to do public speaking. And those folks are going to be great for coffee talks and chats and Kiwanis and Rotary meetings. You're going to have a skill set of people. So I guess I lean into the skill sets of your volunteers. A little bit of success goes a long way. If someone tells you, I want to be a public speaker for your organization, empower that person to do that. If somebody tells you, look, I'm not going to ask people for money, it's not my forte, they're probably not going to be on your resource development committee immediately. Find a place where they can be successful. I have seen quite a shift away from of people who say they're not good at fundraising who become amazing volunteer fundraisers. Our governance chair on our board said, and I won't tell his name, but if you do a little research, you'll be able to find it, says that he was no good at fundraising. And then I looked a couple years ago and he was the chair of a local campaign that was happening, and he can raise money with the best of them. And so with that being said, the secret sauce is asking people to do what they're good at, to foster that good relationship and to empower them to do that, stand out of their way. all too often we think as executive directors that we can tell our story the best. We cannot. If we tee up our volunteers, if we tee up, and in my case, I also tee up the college president, if we tee up our best folks to go and sit down and have those best conversations, the goodness is going to happen. You just have to do the legwork. You have to be willing to wear all the hats, right? Sometimes we're the president in the room, and sometimes we're the secretary, and sometimes we're the janitor, and sometimes we're the bus driver, whatever it takes to get the right people connected, to tell the right story at the right moment. And we all refer to that as a values alignment. You just want the right people to tell the right story at the right time. It's all the correctness. Hugh, I'll divert a little bit because I want to say this. In fundraising, I'm a certified fundraising executive. And one of the things they tell us is there is truly a formula to fundraising. The cycle of fundraising, I'll share it with you. It's very easy. I live by this principle, and I believe it goes further than philanthropy or direct fundraising. It's the 4 steps are identification, cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship. Now, let me go through that again. Identification, cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship. I believe you can use that same thing for board recruitment. I believe you can use that same premise for bringing in a new employee. You need to identify what your organization needs and the skills of the people that need to be aligned with that position. So identification is key. Who's the right fit? Who's the right person? And then there's the cultivation. There's the dating portion of what it's going to take to get this person to understand where you want them to be and how they fit in. So that cultivation is building that relationship that Hugh talked about, and really uplifting the moment where you're going to do that 3rd step. And that 3rd step's the big one. That's the one that we all focus in on all too often as the most important, but it is important and it does have to happen. That's the solicitation. You have to ask. You have to make the ask, whether that's for $1, $1 million, or for someone to serve on your board. Solicitation, step number 3. And then all too vitally important is stewardship. How do you appropriately recognize and thank the people for what they do, whether that's volunteering or donating, whatever that is? You've got to be able to use those 4 steps. And if you do it, not only will it work in fundraising, it'll work for you in board recruitment, board engagement, enrollment for colleges here. We've got to identify our target audience. We've got to get the right marketing pitch out there. Once they come in, we have to have the right value proposition. And then once they're here, they have to feel like they're a part of a community. So whatever your product, whatever your organization, those 4 steps, I believe, can serve you well.
Wow. That's so critical. The stewardship part is where we really fall down, staying in touch with the donors, letting them know what's happened with their donation, and that we have been good stewards, because in our world, we're custodians of other people's money. And it's for purpose. So let's go back to telling a story. Now, there are people gifted at telling story, but everybody has a capacity to tell a story with their language. And we don't do enough of that. We typically do a lot more good work than we're able to tell people about it. So how do you cultivate this storytelling, even with people who think they aren't good at it?
Yeah, Hugh, there's so much noise in our world these days. There's so much either in the backdrop or even in the foreground. We've all heard that there are sort of 50,000 action points a day for our young people that are consuming information through their devices, their phones, their TVs, and then all the stimulation that's around them. We live in a very noisy society. So with that being said, I think that each organization probably needs to understand a couple of key premises. Number one is, what's the best message to share? You got to refine your story, right? And again, what makes it unique? What makes it relevant? What makes it stand out? So you have to refine your story before you can share your story. So really come to grips, go through your identity crisis, go through the work to get that mission, vision, and goals. Hugh, you've been helping us do that, and we're very grateful for you. Even if you're a 40-year-old organization, you have to hit the reset button every now and then and say, well, just because I used to do it this way doesn't mean it's going to be successful now as it was decades ago. So make sure you're listening to your consumers, your customers, your audience, that it's resounding, the story you're telling. Because if not, you have to go back to square one, which is where a lot of us go, is how do you hit the reset button and make sure that you've got a good story to share? And then there's the sharing of the story. Now, there are as many ways to share stories these days as there has ever been. There are more mediums and markets than ever. We used to have to be very verse in our oral presentations and our public speaking. That's no longer the case. Any 11-year-old potential scout, a girl or a boy with a cell phone, can make a video and share it with TikTok or on YouTube. I do personally believe that if you're an organization that has consumers that can share direct testimonials, that's more powerful than ever. We want our students to be on our social media platforms. We want our students to be telling their stories directly. No longer do you have to rely on a conduit to share your story. Now, of course, if you got $1 million in marketing money, bless you. Most of us put marketing at the very end of our budget and we spend what's left, which is usually nothing. So this marketing thing has always been a nut to crack. With that being said, it's never been easier to tell our story. But what I would say to nonprofit leaders is, number one, examine your story. Make sure the story you're sharing is relevant today, and make sure that the people who are going to consume it, who are you going to send that message to? It's the old telephone game, right? Who are your consumers? Who are the stakeholders that need to hear that messaging? And then be very direct and intentional about who shares that message. So it's the what, the who, and the where is it headed. And so I know it sounds so simple. We really we simplify it so much that we make it sound so easy. It's not. But getting your story out there could be as easy and advantageous as ever.
It is a lot easier than we make it. The work we do is difficult, but we make it harder. So you talked about wearing different hats and doing different roles. Now, there's a fine line between doing it and empowering others. You know, you get good people, you're clear on the vision, you've defined the goals, and then there's a place to get out of the way. So there's, in America, I think there's 1.6 million nonprofits.
Wow.
And the Meyer Foundation did a survey that 45% were burned out and leaving. This is before the pandemic. Now, we do that to ourselves by over-functioning. We do things that others could do. So I watched you in the planning session with your board. Everybody was engaged. Everybody participated. You kind of sat at a position that wasn't a power position. But when you spoke up, people paid attention because you'd built a relationship and the credibility, but you didn't speak for people. So how do you do this dance of doing enough, but allowing other people to do what they can do, rising to their level of proficiency?
That's a great question. I wish I haven't mastered. I don't, but it starts with biting your tongue and shutting up. I got to tell you, for people like us, Hugh and I, and then many that are probably listening or watching, participating, it's hard because we all believe we have relevant information to share. Listening is so important. And then also choosing the right opportunity to give information. For an executive director or paid staff, it is so vital to share the appropriate information up front, and then really be quiet. Bite your tongue, sit back. You'll know when to sort of lean in and sort of appropriately stir the conversation. Sometimes we call that guiding the conversation. I very, very much stay away from. I used to think that I could control what the outcomes or things were. I cannot do that. I used to think that I could, but now I realize that I certainly cannot do that. I've heard people talk about guided discoveries. I think only my wife has the ability to do that. She can guide me to where I'm supposed to be, but for boards, it does not work. Really, what you have to do is have an understanding of where you want to be, and really no concept or preconceived notions about how you're going to get there, because I'm telling you, oftentimes we're wrong. We're relying on our historical knowledge and data, our expertise, our experience about what's worked right in the past. What I've seen in the past 2 or 3 years is sometimes those principles are no longer relevant. There are many ways to get to the destination that we're all after. I think oftentimes our job is to tee up an important topic, sit back, be quiet, and every now and then, if we're off topic, push people back to center on the topic, not necessarily on how to accomplish the goal, and then learn to be quiet again. Hugh, you do this better than most. At the very end, there has to be someone that's collecting the yeses and nos in the data. There's nothing worse than doing great work for an hour and two and then walking away and nothing happens after that. So ensuring that there is appropriate follow-up is as important as anything. We all want to hear ourselves talk and we all want to give information, but then it comes to the very end of who's going to own this? Who's going to take this and run with it? That's a very important ask at the very end of the conversation. And then after you say, here's what we're saying, here's what we want to do, here's going to own it, here's we're going to come back and talk about it again.
That's a whole sequence that doesn't always happen, but it's crucial. So my last topic is competition versus collaboration. Now, we think we got our own little silo, we got our own volunteers, our own donors, but guess what? They support others. So what keeps us from collaborating in community?
Yeah, just our own stupidity, I think. I'm a very competitive person, so I'll sort of speak out of both sides of my mouth. I think the first time I took the Myers-Briggs study, they were revealing the studies through the Boy Scouts of America. We went to Texas for a 2-week training, and we did the questionnaires before we arrived. And then once we got there, they sort of said, well, now we're going to tell you what you are. And I was like, well, I already know who I am. That's the kind of person I was then. You don't have to tell me. I know who I am. They said, we have an Attila the Hun in the room. And they started saying, and I was like, oh no, who is this person? He said, Chris Bryant, where are you? And so I could not believe, but I was not in the place where I maybe thought I could or should be in the world standing. But with that being said, I think that truly what we've got to understand is that competitive me that existed in playing college football and growing up, the youngest of 7 children, which will make you competitive as well. Collaboration is key. So I have really learned that from several good leaders who have taught me that investment in others is the right investment. And when you can lean into another organization, so I do a lot of work with the Boy Scouts, and I've heard over the past several years that there has to be a lot of sort of discrepancy and headbutting with the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts organizations right now, because boys have now opened up their organization for girls to participate in the program. So I had a friend come to me and say, well, the Girl Scouts must be really upset with you guys that now the Boy Scouts are sort of getting into the market share of Girl Scouts. And so what's that relationship like? Here's the answer that I gave to that person. The Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts together nationally are only serving 6% of total available youth population. Both of us need to get over ourselves and worry about the 94% of customers we're not reaching. So just let that be sort of our calling card, that regardless of what we may think about competition, collaboration truly is an opportunity for all of us to lean in, to uplift one another, to help each other, to love one another. And there are so many seeds to be sown together. Hugh, you started the question with a number of donors. It's a fact that donors have 6 to 7 organizations that they truly believe in and they lean into. Now, all of us probably give to 20 or let's just say we give to 20 nonprofits. Through the year, you stop and put a little bit of money at the Salvation Army. There's Dan, you gave $5 and you're done. So you're going to give to 20 nonprofits over the course of a year, but studies show you're really going to lean into those 5, 6, or 7. You just want to know where you are with your donors. One of the questions I always ask my donors when I have those sit down visits, I say, tell me who your top 5 organizations that you love to be involved in are, and tell me more about that. And then the follow-up question is, where do we rank amongst your top 5? Where does CVCC Educational Foundation fall? Those are questions that are good to ask. They're tough questions to ask, but your donors are okay with sharing that information. And if they're not, they'll tell you. But oftentimes they'll tell you and you may be pleasantly surprised.
Those are just astounding. Nobody, like I said at the beginning of this is going to be a very unique interview in 7.5 years. They're all very different. So Chris Bryant, this has been so informative, so encouraging, and to be focused on the leader as an influencer in all of what you're talking about is so critical. What parting thought or tip or challenge do you want to leave people with today?
I'm really going to piggyback on the word that you just used. My 18-year-old son said this just yesterday. He used the word influencer. All my life, I thought that you could be a controller, a leader, a dictator, a captain. The most relevant word that I think really circulates amongst our young teens today is influencer. Did you know that there are people for a living, all they do is influence other members of the society? Think about that. There are folks that have YouTube followers or followship of 1 million people. And sometimes I think, what did this person do? How did they aspire to become this? What expertise do they have to be an influencer? It's belief, it's passion. And so if you have love and joy and passion and belief in your heart, and you're called to serve something greater than yourself, you're an influencer. So the only parting comment that I'll have is always look to a brighter day. Always understand that it's our job to push advancement and growth. And then lastly, be an influential person for good. If you've built a team of good people and you have good people surround you, man, good things are going to happen.
Chris Bryant, thank you so much for this helpful interview today and being our guest on the Nonprofit Exchange.
You're welcome. I hope that there's at least one nugget in there somewhere.
There is. Thank you so much.
Thanks you.
Thank you for watching the Nonprofit Exchange.